You're wrong. That's all she said. Not sorry, not wait, not even it's not what it looks like. She looked me in the eyes, adjusted her necklace like I had just interrupted her dinner order, and said it again, quieter this time. You're wrong. 2 words. That's what I got for 10 years of marriage. The music kept playing behind me. Some kind of jazz lounge remix of just the 2 of us. It sounded stupid now. Someone laughed. A champagne cork popped. A waiter brushed past me with mini crab cakes. I couldn't move. I was still holding the USB drive. That stupid silver USB drive. The one she made me pick up from her home office desk that morning because she forgot it at home and needed it for a work presentation. The same USB drive I'd looked at twice, wondering why it had a piece of blue painter's tape across the back that said weekend. What the hell kind of files get labeled weekend? Turns out, the kind that show your wife, in a hotel room with her boss. 3 different hotel rooms, to be specific. Each video timestamped. Each file neatly named like chapters of a novella. Sat_PM, Sun_M, Sun_late. I should have deleted them, but I didn't. I watched them. I watched them all. And then I got in my car, drove straight to her company's rooftop party, and walked in without a single plan in my head. She didn't even flinch when I showed her the drive. Just smiled like I'd brought her a coffee with the wrong milk. You're wrong. That was the 3rd time. I finally said it. You just ended our marriage. She took a sip of her drink. Tequila, not wine. I could smell it, and tilted her head. And then, she laughed. She laughed. Not in a cruel way. Worse. It was the laugh you give a child when they say something naive. Pity. That kind of laugh. And that's when she said it a 4th time, slow, deliberate, with this awful calmness. You're wrong. It ended 3 months ago. And then she walked away, like I wasn't even real anymore. She walked away straight toward him. Devin, her boss, the man from the videos. The man I had just learned wasn't just her boss. He was something else, something much worse. But I didn't know that yet. That part came later. It came when I plugged that same USB into my own laptop that night and found a hidden folder called If Found. What was inside made everything worse, and I mean unthinkably worse. I didn't sleep that night. After the rooftop, I drove until my hands started cramping on the wheel. I didn't even remember how I got home. I walked into our kitchen, turned on the light, and the hum of the fridge was the loudest thing in the world. Everything looked the same. The magnet that said, "Choose joy." The ceramic spoon rest she bought in Asheville. Her half-drunk green juice, still in the fridge, labeled "Don't touch," in pink Sharpie. I dropped the USB drive on the table like it was radioactive. I couldn't stop replaying her words. You're wrong. It ended 3 months ago. What did that mean? Was it about her feelings? Had she emotionally left me already? Or was it something else, something factual? I opened my laptop. I didn't want to look at the videos again, but I had to understand. I needed to know if there was more to this. And that's when I saw it. A hidden folder, lightly grayed out, named If Found. I almost didn't click it. It felt too intentional, like a trap. But curiosity is louder than caution when you've got nothing left to lose. Inside were 4 files, all password protected except one, a text file called read__first. TXT. My heart was pounding, not the poetic kind. I mean really pounding, like I was about to discover something that would change my understanding of the last 10 years. I opened the file. If you're reading this, Marvin, you've already seen the surface. But you don't know the whole picture. You think I betrayed you, and I did. But not in the way you believe. And if you want to know why, figure out the password. Hint, it's the name of the place I told you I hated most. My mouth went dry. What the hell was this? A game? A confession? A warning? I stared at the screen. My brain kicked into overdrive. I remembered a conversation from years ago at some winery in California. She said she hated Florida. Too humid, too many bugs. But she really hated Cleveland. Said it felt like the air was stale and heavy. Could it be that simple? I typed in Cleveland. The first file unlocked. It wasn't a video. It was an email sent from an encrypted account to someone named D. It read, Phase 2 starts Friday. Marvin doesn't suspect anything. We'll ensure he finds the drive after rooftop. Let me know when legal signs off. T. My stomach twisted. Phase 2? Legal? What was this? Was she setting me up? I tried the password on the next file, and it worked. Another email. He'll break. You were right. He's weak when he feels like someone else is pulling the strings. Once he starts doubting reality, he spirals. Use that. He won't fight back. He never does. That one broke me. That wasn't just betrayal. That was cruelty, calculated and documented. Someone had studied me like a lab rat. And worst of all, they were right. I was spiraling. I wasn't fighting. I was reading this like a scared kid hiding under a blanket, hoping the monster goes away. But I didn't close the folder. Because deep down, I knew there was more. A reason. A plan. A bigger truth. And if there was a phase 2. What the hell was phase 1? I stared at the last line of that email for at least 10 minutes. He won't fight back. He never does. It echoed in my head like it was being read aloud by someone sitting right behind me. I could almost hear her voice saying it. Calm, clinical, detached. The kind of tone you'd use to describe a lab specimen, not your husband. Every cell in my body was screaming to shut the laptop, to delete everything, to go to bed and pretend the last 12 hours hadn't happened. But I couldn't. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was something colder. A performance. A setup. I tried to think logically. D must have been Devin, her boss, but that email, let me know when legal signs off, made no sense in the context of an affair. Affairs don't go through legal. Unless it wasn't about romance at all. I decided to dig. I might be a soft-hearted science teacher, but I know how to follow a trail. I searched the metadata of the emails, sender address masked, but the IP was traceable to a company VPN, one I didn't recognize. I copied the domain, opened a private tab, and pasted it. A simple corporate page loaded, Veritan Strategies, with a sterile tagline underneath, Behavioral Engineering for Tomorrow's Markets. I had no idea what that meant. But I knew one thing. Teresa didn't work there. She worked for an ecotech firm called Lumia. This was something else. I looked deeper. Veritan had a contact list of key consultants. There were no photos, just initials and roles. My heart sank when I saw TM. Social Dynamics Consultant. My wife's initials. I clicked it, but the link was restricted. I tried again. No access. It was like the site knew I didn't belong there. That was the first time I felt it. Not heartbreak, not anger, but fear. The kind of cold fear that starts in your gut and climbs up your spine. If this was real, if she had been working with these people, then the last few years of my life weren't what I thought they were. Every argument, every apology, every random moment of emotional distance, it all started to feel choreographed. And then I remembered something she'd said 2 months ago, the night we'd had our worst fight. I'd accused her of being distracted, distant. She told me I was projecting insecurities and said I was so easy to read. It's almost unfair. At the time, I thought she meant it in a relationship sense. But now, reading those emails, I wondered if it meant something literal. I opened the third file in the folder, half expecting another email, but it wasn't. It was an audio file. A recording. My cursor hovered over it for a long time before I clicked. The file started with a faint hum, like it had been recorded in an office. Then, Teresa's voice. Calm, professional, precise. Subject M has entered full reactive phase. Avoid direct confrontation for 72 hours. Emotional disruption will peak between 38 and 50 hours. Recommends secondary stimulus for final collapse. Subject M. She was talking about me. I felt my throat tighten. My own wife was running an experiment on me. There was another voice in the recording, male, steady, confident. Devin. Is he aware of what's happening? Not consciously, she replied. He'll interpret everything as emotional betrayal. It's cleaner that way. My stomach turned. I wanted to throw up, scream, destroy something, but I just sat there, frozen, listening to my life being described like a set of variables in a spreadsheet. The recording ended abruptly. I stared at the screen for what felt like forever. When I finally looked up, the reflection of my face in the laptop screen didn't even look like me anymore. That's when the phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won again. I answered, voice trembling. Marvin, a voice said. A man's voice. Calm, confident, familiar. You weren't supposed to open those files yet. The line went dead. I just sat there, in the dark, with the hum of the fridge and the laptop screen glowing like a confession booth. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped the phone. I picked it up again, opened my messages, and saw a new notification. It was from Teresa. One sentence. Please stop looking. It's not what you think. But after everything I'd just seen and heard, I didn't believe that for a second. And the worst part? The message was sent from a number that wasn't hers. The first thing I did was copy the number. It wasn't saved in my contacts, and it wasn't her regular one. No photo, no thread history. Just that message, sitting in my inbox like a landmine. Please stop looking. It's not what you think. I stared at it long enough for the screen to dim. My thumb hovered over the call button, but something in me hesitated. I didn't know who, or what, would pick up on the other end. Instead, I opened a reverse lookup tool and typed it in. The results came back blank. Not unlisted or private, blank. No name, no address, not even a carrier. Just a line of red text at the bottom. This number does not exist in public databases. That's when it started to feel less like a betrayal and more like a trap. A design. Something built to fall apart in exactly the way it was falling. And the terrifying part? I didn't know how far back the design went. I pulled out my old laptop, the one Teresa never touched. I wanted to retrace everything. Emails, photo timestamps, even calendar entries. I needed to know if anything in my marriage had been real. It was slow, barely held a charge, but it still booted. I opened our shared cloud drive, scrolled back through 6 years of photos. And something strange hit me. There were gaps. Entire months missing. No Christmas 2021. No photos from her sister's wedding. No trip to Maine. I knew we went. I remembered us kayaking and laughing about the lobster rolls. But there were no images, no videos, no shared notes. Like the data had been selectively wiped. And then, beneath one of the 2019 folders, I saw it. A subfolder titled Marv_backup, modified just 2 weeks ago. I never made it. Inside were dozens of screenshots. Messages, call logs, even GPS history, all from my phone. The contents were chilling. Notes I'd written and deleted. Drafts of emails I never sent. Voicemails I thought were erased. Private journal entries from a notepad app one hadn't used in years. Someone had been copying everything, watching my patterns, studying my emotions in real time. And all of it was backed up under my name. That's when something clicked. I remembered the first time I met Teresa's coworker Devin. It was 4 years ago, during some company retreat upstate. I'd only spoken to him for 5 minutes, but he'd asked me something strange. Do you ever wonder if the person you're with is only with you to see what happens when you break? At the time, I thought it was philosophical. Corporate speak. The kind of abstract nonsense you say over overpriced craft beer. But now it haunted me. My head was spinning. I stood up too fast and knocked over a chair. The crash startled me, not just because of the noise, but because it felt like I was coming out of a fog. I suddenly saw my apartment as if for the first time. Our books, our prints on the wall, the record player we never used anymore. And I thought, how much of this did I choose? How much was mine? And how much was placed around me like props on a stage? The phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't from Teresa's secret number. It was an email notification. The subject line was just a single word, stop. The body of the email contained an IP address and a message. If you keep going, we can't protect you anymore. No name, no signature, no footer. I copied the IP, traced it. It led to an unlisted server hosted in Switzerland. Some offshore ghost box with 0 DNS records. The kind of thing used by whistleblowers and black budget agencies. I stared at it until my eyes hurt. Who was we? What did they mean by protect? And what was I being protected from? I couldn't tell if I was unraveling a conspiracy or if I was the conspiracy. I didn't sleep that night either. I sat at the kitchen table until dawn, staring at a wall, while the fridge hummed and the world outside kept turning like nothing was wrong. But everything was wrong, because I was starting to believe that my entire marriage, my entire relationship, had been a long experiment, a behavioral study, maybe even a manipulation campaign. And if that were true, there was one final question I was too afraid to ask. Why me? I don't know what possessed me to look for him. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the silence of the apartment, so loud it felt alive. I had been awake for nearly 40 hours, and the line between clarity and madness was starting to blur. But one thought kept clawing its way to the surface: Teresa's brother. The ghost in every story she never told. His name was Marcus. I only met him once, briefly, at our wedding. He'd shown up late, stayed for 10 minutes, and left without saying goodbye. Teresa barely acknowledged him. When I asked about it afterward, she'd brushed it off with a simple, "He's not well." I never pressed. I didn't realize then that "not well" might have meant something far stranger than illness. I started digging through old records, desperate for a trace of him. I found an old address from an emergency contact form Teresa filled out years ago. It led to a small town about 3 hours north, a place called Pine Ridge. It wasn't even on Google Maps properly, just a pin on a rural highway surrounded by nothing but woods and the echo of its own name. I didn't tell anyone I was going. There wasn't anyone to tell. The drive was endless. Every mile felt like I was traveling deeper into some part of the world that wasn't meant to be found. The trees grew denser, the air heavier, until the radio signal disappeared completely. I pulled into what passed for a main street, a gas station, a bar, and a hardware store that looked abandoned. I parked and showed Marcus's old photo to the cashier. The man squinted, scratched his beard, and said, "You mean the guy who used to stay at the old mill?" I asked if he still lived there. The man shrugged. "Ain't seen him in years. But you can try, if you got the stomach for it." The old mill sat at the edge of a lake, covered in ivy and silence. I should have turned back. Every instinct screamed that I was walking into something I couldn't understand. But curiosity is poison when it mixes with heartbreak. I pushed open the door. It creaked like something warning me, and the first thing I noticed was the smell of paper. Damp, aged paper. The kind that lives too long in the dark. There were stacks of notebooks, maps, and what looked like blueprints spread across a makeshift desk. A typewriter sat in the corner beside a wall covered in photos. My stomach dropped when I recognized the faces in them. Me and Teresa. Our wedding, our house, even pictures of me teaching, ones I didn't know existed. Someone had been documenting my entire life, down to the smallest detail. I heard movement upstairs. My first thought was to run, but before I could, a voice called out, "Marvin?" It was a man's voice, hoarse, unsteady, but somehow familiar. He stepped into view slowly, tall, gaunt, with the same sharp cheekbones as Teresa. He looked like he hadn't seen sunlight in years. "I knew you'd come eventually," he said. His tone was flat, like it was a fact, not a surprise. "You've started seeing it, haven't you? The layers." I asked him what the hell he meant. Marcus gave a thin smile. "Veritan, they didn't just study you. They built you." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was the only thing I could do. Built me? What did that even mean? I told him he was crazy. But then he opened one of the drawers and pulled out a file. My name was printed on the cover in clean black letters. Subject M, 204/behavioral conditioning trial. Inside were pages of data, charts tracking my emotional responses, my decision-making tendencies, even my physiological reactions during arguments. There were graphs showing spikes in heart rate correlated with key moments in my marriage. Notes written in neat handwriting that I recognized instantly. Teresa M. Subject exhibiting compliant patterns. Recommend phase extension. I felt my knees give way. Marcus kept talking, his words spilling out faster now, like he'd been waiting years to release them. He said Veritan was part of a defense research branch that studied long-term emotional manipulation, a program meant to test the limits of human trust, loyalty, and breakdown. They had used domestic relationships as their testing ground. Teresa wasn't just part of it. She was one of their top analysts. "Why me?" I asked, barely able to speak. Marcus's eyes softened. "Because you were perfect for it," he said. "Empathetic. Predictable. You make decisions based on guilt. You were the control subject they couldn't afford to lose." I didn't want to believe him. I couldn't. But the documents in my hands felt too real, too specific to be fiction. My handwriting was there, replicated on forms I never filled. My signature appeared on waivers I never signed. Marcus told me there was one last piece, something called the reflection file. He said if I wanted the truth, I'd have to find it myself. "She keeps it close," he said, lowering his voice. "But not at home. Look somewhere she'd never expect you to go." Before I could ask what that meant, headlights flashed through the cracked window. A car pulled up outside. Marcus's face changed instantly. Panic, real panic. "You need to leave," he hissed. "Now. If they find you here, it's over." I didn't understand what he meant by they, but when I heard footsteps outside, heavy and synchronized, I didn't stay to ask. I grabbed the file, bolted through the back door, and ran until the trees swallowed the sound of the car engines. When I finally made it back to my car, shaking and out of breath, I realized my phone was gone. And that's when I saw it, a notification glowing faintly on the car's dashboard screen. It was from Teresa's secret number again. "You shouldn't have found him." The ride back from Pine Ridge felt twice as long. The roads blurred into a kind of numb gray, like I was moving through static, not space. I kept one eye on the rear view the entire time. No cars followed me. At least, none that I noticed. But the weight in my chest said otherwise. I clutched the folder Marcus gave me like it was radioactive. I couldn't stop thinking about the way he'd said they built you. It sounded insane, like something out of a bad spy movie. And yet, the folder hadn't felt like fiction. It had details. My handwriting, my heart rate charts, transcribed conversations from years ago. Memories I hadn't thought about in forever, reduced to bullet points in a file. That kind of detail doesn't come from paranoia. That's documentation. When I pulled up outside my apartment, something felt immediately off. It wasn't dramatic. No broken windows, no wide open door. But it was too quiet. Not the kind of quiet you notice when you've been gone for a while. The kind that feels like someone's already been inside and cleaned up after themselves. I unlocked the door and stepped in slowly. Everything looked almost exactly the same, except it wasn't. The small things were wrong. The welcome mat had been turned the other direction. The bookshelf had its rows straightened perfectly, too perfectly. My cup from earlier? Washed and dried. The spoon rest? Gone. I didn't say anything out loud. I just stood there, listening. The hum of the fridge was gone. I walked over and realized it had been unplugged, then plugged back in. The clock was blinking, reset. Someone had cut the power. I rushed to my bedroom and flung open the closet. The box where I kept my old journals, missing. I checked the drawer where Teresa used to store old flash drives. All gone. Whoever had come here wasn't looking for valuables. They wanted records. History. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up when I saw it. A note taped to the bathroom mirror. One of those cheap sticky notes, pale yellow, written in handwriting that looked almost exactly like mine. Almost. The Marvin you think you are never existed. Let go. I ripped it off the glass and backed out of the room, hands shaking. I needed to get out, regroup, think somewhere else. I grabbed the folder from Marcus, threw it in my backpack, and headed for the door. That's when I saw it. The front door wasn't locked. I always lock the door. Out of habit, out of anxiety. Muscle memory. But the lock was turned sideways, open. And that's when I heard it. Not from inside the apartment, but through the hallway wall. A soft, rhythmic thudding, like footsteps moving slowly from the stairwell. Not rushing. Pacing. I slipped out the back exit and ran 5 blocks to the train station. Didn't stop until I was 3 neighborhoods away. I found a 24-hour diner and took a seat in the back where no one could see my face. I opened the folder again, hoping to make sense of what Marcus had given me. But there was something new inside now, a second note. I swear it wasn't there before. It was printed, not handwritten. You're not the subject anymore. You're the variable. I read it 10 times and still couldn't tell if it was a threat or a warning. I flipped the page over and saw a phone number, a local area code. No name. Just a caption underneath. Reflection file location, speak the phrase. Where was I born? I didn't call. Not yet. I just stared at that number like it was going to change on its own. The waitress asked if I wanted coffee. I nodded, but didn't touch it when she brought it. My mind was spinning too fast to think clearly. What was the reflection file? Why did Marcus say Teresa kept it close? And who was I supposed to speak to? Was it a phone line or something else? But the real question, the one that haunted me as the sun started to rise over the city, wasn't about Teresa or Marcus or Veridan strategies. It was about me. Because for the first time, I realized something no one ever wants to admit out loud. I didn't remember where I was born. Not the town. Not the hospital. Not even the state. It was just blank. I didn't call right away. I waited. Hours passed while I just sat there in the back of that diner, eyes glued to the phone number on the bottom of the page, like if I stared long enough it would vanish and give me a way out. But it didn't. It just sat there, patient, knowing I'd give in. And eventually, I did. I walked 3 blocks in the opposite direction of home, found an alley behind a closed thrift store, and dialed the number with my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The phone rang once. Then silence. No click. No tone. Just silence. And then, a calm female voice. Not Teresa. Not someone I recognized. Speak the phrase. I swallowed hard. My mouth was dry. I hesitated, then said it slowly, like reciting something I wasn't supposed to remember. Where was I born? There was a short pause. Then a mechanical tone. Then a second voice. Male, distorted, calm. Subject M204, it said. Request acknowledged. Reflection file access granted. Coordinates sent. Click. The line went dead. A second later, a text appeared on my screen with a GPS pin and a time. Access window. 2 to 3 o'clock. One-time entry. It was just after midnight. The pin dropped on a location I didn't recognize, a place called Redwell Behavioral Research Campus, almost 2 hours west of the city. I Googled it, but nothing came up except an archived public health site that hadn't been updated since 2008. One blurry photo of a brick building with no signage, no staff names, no history. It felt off. Sanitized. Forgotten on purpose. I stole a change of clothes from a thrift bin, wrapped the documents in plastic, and took a rental car under a fake name. I knew that if I used my real ID, someone, maybe Veritan, maybe worse, would track the movement. They were already inside my apartment. I had to assume they were always watching now. The drive was dark, foggy, and every sign on the highway looked like it was written in a language I used to know but had forgotten. When I finally reached the turnoff, I almost missed it. A cracked, unlit road led through rows of dead trees. No gates, no fences, just a narrow path that seemed to vanish into the earth. At exactly 2:06 a.m., I pulled into the lot. There were no other cars, no lights in the windows. The building itself looked abandoned, brick crumbling, ivy choking the sides, the kind of place kids dare each other to spend a night in. But the glass door opened when I touched it. Not automatic. Unlocked. Inside, the air was warm. Clean. Too clean. Like someone had scrubbed the scent of time from the walls. Fluorescent lights flickered on down the hallway as I stepped inside, each one clicking awake as if guiding me forward. I followed them. The hall curved twice and ended in a heavy door with no handle. As I approached, it hissed and slid open. A voice, the same one from the call, echoed overhead. Subject M204. Please remain calm. This is a controlled environment. I stepped inside and found myself in a small observation room. Glass walls on 3 sides, monitors on the far wall. In the center, a single steel table with a manila folder on top. A spotlight hung above it, humming faintly. I approached slowly, every muscle tight, every instinct telling me to run. But I opened the folder anyway. Inside were photographs. Dozens. Some I recognized. Me as a child, me with my mother, or who I thought was my mother. Me in a school uniform I didn't remember ever wearing. But some were different. Photos of me standing in rooms I'd never seen. Me shaking hands with men in suits. Me sleeping in what looked like a hospital bed, wires attached to my head, medical notes on the wall behind me. All stamped with a code. M204, revision, A through H. At the back of the folder was a single sheet of paper titled Subject Narrative Timeline, Synthetic Layer Integration Log. The first line read, Memory Foundation Initiated, 1994, Initial Identity Seed Applied, Marvin C. Music Instructor, Empathic, Low Risk. I blinked hard. Reread it. My skin went cold. Memory Foundation. Seed. My life was a narrative? A designed construct? I flipped to the second page and saw a list of relationship markers. Every major life moment with Teresa was logged. Date of meeting. Date of cohabitation. Date of first argument. Each followed by a note. Observed response. Compliant. Subject remains unaware. Then I saw the final entry. Protocol breach triggered. Subject achieved partial awareness. Emotional response exceeded prediction curve. Containment required. Suddenly, one of the monitors on the wall lit up. It showed a camera feed of me. Right then, standing in the room. I turned and looked up. The light above me shifted slightly. They were watching me now. The voice came again. Not mechanical this time. Familiar. I froze. Marvin, it said. Teresa's voice. Clear, calm, steady. You weren't supposed to find this place. But maybe it's better that you did. I backed away from the folder, from the monitors, from her voice echoing around me. You wanted the truth, she said. So here it is. A second door opened behind me, silent and slow. Beyond it, a hallway darker than the one before. Walk through it, she said, and I'll show you where it really began. I stood at the edge of the threshold, staring down the hallway that had no lights, no sound, no end I could see. Teresa's voice still echoed in my ears. Walk through it, and I'll show you where it really began. I wasn't sure if I was walking toward the truth or toward my own erasure. Maybe both. But after everything I'd seen, after being treated like a file, a number, a variable. I couldn't turn back. I needed something real, even if it shattered me completely. I walked. The corridor felt longer than it was, and each step triggered a faint, echoing click, like I was walking across an invisible threshold again and again. After what felt like forever, I reached another door. No handle, just a small panel on the side. It lit up as I approached, and then, without me touching anything, it opened. What I saw wasn't what I expected. No scientists. No interrogators. No cold white lab. Instead, I stepped into a sunlit room. Actual sun, not LEDs. There were windows. Real windows, opened slightly, with the sound of birds outside. Trees swayed in the breeze. And the air smelled like spring. Teresa was sitting in a chair by the window. Not behind glass. Not on a screen. There in front of me. No clipboard. No suit. Just her. The woman I'd loved. And hated. And tried so hard to understand. She looked up, and for the first time in a long time, there was no guarded look. No performance. Her eyes were raw. Human. Sit, she said softly. Please. I did. Slowly. Cautiously. I never wanted you to find this place, she said, voice trembling now. Not because I wanted to lie to you, but because I knew what it would do to you. What it did to me. I didn't say anything. My hands were shaking in my lap. It started as a job, she continued. Behavioral mapping. Emotional modeling. You were chosen because you fit a pattern. Not weak, honest. You didn't hide your emotions. You leaned into them. That's what made you perfect. And I was supposed to manage your arc, watch you grow, fracture, adapt. You were supposed to break me, I said. Not a question. A fact. She nodded. But her eyes, they weren't cold. They were full of something else now. Guilt. Grief. I did my job too well, she said. I didn't just study you. I started to care. For real. That's not supposed to happen. I swallowed hard. So what, all of it was fake? No, she said quickly. That's the mistake they made. They thought if we designed love, it would be controllable. But it's not. It never is. Somewhere between the data points and the protocols, we crossed a line. I did. And by the time I realized it, you were more real to me than anything in the program. I didn't know what to say. My head was swimming. They gave me a choice, she whispered. Wipe you. Start fresh. Or release you. I looked up at her. Release me. She nodded. This facility isn't a prison. It's a door. One most subjects never reach. But you did. And that means you get to choose now. The wall behind her opened. Beyond it, sunlight poured in. A narrow dirt path led into a forest. On the side wall, a screen flickered to life. My old life, my apartment, my school, my friends, appeared like a slideshow. You can return to that life, she said. Everything reset. No more monitoring. No more variables. Just you. Or, she gestured toward the forest path. You can walk through that door and begin again. Not as Marvin. Not as Subject M204. As whoever you want to be. A clean slate. No memory implants. No structure. No design. I looked at her for a long time. Not as a subject. Not even as a husband. But as someone who once, maybe still, loved her. Not for what she was supposed to be, but for who she became when the scripts fell apart. I stood up. I forgive you, I said. Not for the experiment, but for not stopping it sooner. She cried then. Not loud. Just a few tears that she didn't try to hide. Thank you, she whispered. That's more than I deserve. I walked toward the sunlight. Toward the open path. And just before I crossed the threshold, I turned back. If they built me, I said, they did a terrible job. Because I still believe in love. In messy, painful, real love. She smiled through the tears. Then maybe they failed in the best possible way. And I stepped into the light. No more numbers. No more files. No more conditioning. Just air. Just freedom. Just me.